because it's the hour, and also we'll kind of ease into our topic. Let me know, and also Arjun, I guess we can begin the recording, please.
We're good to go.
Let me know. Good. Hello, James.
Hi.
Very nice to see everyone. We're going to be speaking about cause and effect today from a psychological point of view, as a law that is central in this work. It's not exclusive. There are many other laws that some of which we need to learn and understand how to accommodate, but in particular, this law is of importance. And the way we're going to approach it is looking at it on a very big scale to start. In fact, on the scale of a lifetime. Here's what Gurdjieff has to say about that. He says, a person accustomed to self-observation knows for certain that at different periods of his life, he has understood one and the same idea, one and the same thought in totally different ways. So Gurdjieff is saying that understanding fluctuates, and according to him, on the scale of a lifetime. Inspired by this large scale, I thought to use the lifetime of the painter Rembrandt. We have it in his self-portraits. Now, before I ask some of you to share your impressions on these portraits, I want to suggest an attitude by which we can look at them. Because you see, self-portraiture is, of course, not exclusive to Rembrandt. Many painters did self-portraits, many still do. But we will initially think, when we approach a portrait of somebody, we will tend to easily think that we're looking at the likeness of a person. This is how he or she looked at this time in their life. When you think about it, there's a problem with that. We don't look the same, do we? Not even throughout the day. If you took portraits of me or Tamara or Kelly, hello, throughout one day, you would catch us in very different states. You know, now I am invigorated and eager to work and ready. Now I'm a little tired. Then I'm a little doubtful, or maybe stuck in procrastination or something. So even within a day, my self-portrait would be emotionally very different. And with that in mind, I want to suggest that when we look at any portrait, but especially Rembrandt's portrait, because this is a specialty of this painter, there is no painter who painted more self-portraits than he. And I want to suggest that when we look at these portraits, we're not just looking at his attempt to paint his own likeness, but we're looking at an attempt of his to capture a certain understanding or realization he had at that point in time. Which of course makes these portraits so much more interesting. And so let's begin with one of his earliest portraits. This is painted at age 23. This is the very beginning of his career, of his painting career. I'd like to ask some of you, what understanding or what realization do you think Rembrandt was trying to capture on his canvas? Notice the way I'm asking it. It means there is no right or wrong answer. We cannot know what Rembrandt himself thought and felt. And that's not what I'm asking for. I'm asking you, each of you, what do you feel he might have realized or understood and attempted to capture on this, in this particular portrait? So, from that point of view, Arjun, let's start with you. What do you think?
So my first impression was that of some surprise, like he realized something that, like he saw something that was maybe shocking to him or something.
Okay, Arjun, yes, thank you. And certainly I would agree with that. Arjun, I will insist again, because I'm asking for your impression, and so you cannot be wrong. If I insisted, Arjun, and asked you, what do you think has surprised him? What would you answer?
I see youthful madness.
Eva, just a moment. I'm still asking Arjun. I want to hear what he thinks.
It's a little hard to say what might have surprised him, but I don't know. I think maybe something that he saw about himself. Yeah, something like that.
Okay, and that's good, Arjun. He saw something, and it's almost obvious, but it makes a difference that you say that. Of course, he's not painting, he's painting himself, and something in that effort surprised him quite a bit, actually. And that's a very good place to start. Eva, what did you want to add?
It's very interesting that someone so young doesn't want to paint a nicer picture of themselves, because I don't really like this face with this heart. It radiates to me a kind of madness of the young age. So seeing himself in as a youthful madness, what I see.
Thank you, Eva. Yes, it is surprising, isn't it, that a 23-year-old would paint an unflattering picture of himself. He's not looking smart internally or externally, disheveled hair, and maybe most strikingly, he's not in a flattering state. He's surprised. He's caught off guard by something, and he cannot even see so well. There's something very clouded about his seeing. Yes, it's true, Eva. Why would or how would a young person have the courage to paint that? Of course, this is one unique attribute of throughout all his portraits, that there was a lot of courage in them, of self-inquiry. Anyone want to add anything? What other impression that might not have been said? Yes, Krista.
Well, I think that it's actually, yes, that it's he shocks about the realization that he knows that it's not him. If we think of him now looking at the mirror, which would have been the way for him to paint himself, but seeing that this is not me, this kind of a realization, and that would explain, I think, also why it's so blurry or kind of like not exact, this painting that he cannot really see, that okay, what is it then? This kind of a impression I get.
Thank you, Krista. I'd like to build on what you say, Krista. And yes, Krista, I would also agree. It's almost as if in this portrait he realized that for the first time, that the subject he's actually painting, who is that? Who is that person? Is that me? I'd like to build on that. And I'd like to complement it with an autobiographical account written by Ouspensky from the time before he met Gurdjieff and before he met the Fourth Way, So he may well have been in this age. I don't know. He doesn't specify. But it fits very well, especially with your observation, Krista. And here it is. Here is the section. He says, the predominant emotion in me was fear. Fear of losing myself. Fear of disappearing into something unknown. I remember one phrase in a letter I wrote at the time. I'm writing this letter to you, but who is going to write the next one, signing it with my name, and what he's going to say, I do not know. This was the fear. Fits pretty well, wouldn't you say, with this early self-portrait. Fear, uncertainty, who am I, and who is this that keeps saying I, that I cannot even anticipate. Interestingly, speaking externally about the life, what we know of Rembrandt's life, this early portrait is actually revolutionary in many respects. Also, Eva, in your regard, in what you observed, that it would be very unusual for anyone, not just young, to portray themselves in such an unflattering way. Also, a lot of the technique and the lighting are unorthodox in this time. And for some of these reasons, Rembrandt would become a very prominent painter, would be noted, and his career around this time, around these early years, would take off, and he would become not only famous, but also sought after. People would want him to paint their portraits. So he would get a lot of commissions. He would become wealthy. He would eventually buy that Rembrandt house that some of us visited together earlier this year in April, and established in his field. Which leads us to a portrait from about that time, a decade later, age 34. Now, as I say this, as I show this, I must acknowledge, I must add a disclaimer that these are my pairings. There were many portraits in between the first one I showed you and the one I'm just showing you of age 34. They are not linear in the sense that you see a very clear linear progression. I must acknowledge that I'm contrasting between these two to convey a certain lesson that has little to do with the history of Rembrandt's life. So just that be clear. I'm using poetic license, as they say. But still, I find it very enlightening, if you like, to show another portrait by the same brush 10 years later, from obviously a different time in the person's life and in his career, and a very, very different internal expression. Given the attitude we spoke of earlier, that this is not necessarily an attempt to show how he looked at age 34, but something he realized or understood, what do you feel he might have realized and understood and tried to put on canvas here? Shoaib, what do you think?
Yeah, so in conjunction with the previous image, in that image I saw that it was the first realization of himself as I am. Like he realized that he is, his focus was outside all the time, but suddenly at some point he said, I am here. And then he didn't know about himself. So astonishment over there. But in the middle image, I see some understanding, but still intrigued. Like, it doesn't make sense. Like he has some understanding, but it's not complete. So he's curious still and intrigued as well. So this impression I get from the middle picture.
Thank you, Shoaib. Definitely an increase in understanding, and also an increase in light, an increase in ability to see, which was almost non-existent in the first portrait.
And lightning also showed that like one half is lightened and other half is still in the dark.
That's right. Thank you, Shoaib. Other observations? What do you feel he might have understood here, or he's trying to show us that he's realized here?
Asaf,
Yes, yes, Mujtaba.
I think in first portraits, he bending forward, like he find something, a new something about. It is like is a small identification with something. He is close to one object, maybe. And the second portrait, he understood, he understand, oh, yes, it is. And he moved a little backward. Maybe it is like he understands something and find something.
Thank you, Mujtaba. A very interesting observation. I had not actually taken note of that. And now that you pointed out, it looks very true. If you look zoomed out at the torso of Rembrandt, it's very true what Mujtaba says. The early portrait, he's leaning forward, he's looking, he's searching, or something like that, pursuing, if you like. In the second one, he's seated back, established, founded, grounded. And that definitely suggests, Mujtaba, what you offered, that here he's understood something, or he's found something that earlier on he lacked. If this is true, and again, we cannot know, and for the sake of today's presentation, we don't really need to know, but the contrast that this shows us and what it teaches us pairs very nicely with the continuation of Ouspensky's thought. Again, from his autobiographical account, just continuing the earlier angle that I shared, he says, there were many other elements in that fear as well. The fear of taking a wrong way, the fear of making an irretrievable mistake, the fear of losing some possibilities. All of this left me later on, when on the one hand, I began to gain confidence in myself, and on the other, to have practical faith in the system. So all this left him, this fear, left Ouspensky later on, when on the one hand he gained self-confidence, which definitely could be argued here that Rembrandt has gained, and also started developing practical faith. A very interesting term, by the way, practical faith in the fourth way. Practical faith meaning something you can verify and use and practice, not just believe in, but you can actually apply. And that gave him the ground that Mujtaba you so nicely express here in that is conveyed in the posture, in the positioning of the torso. Anything else anyone would like to observe, to share about this portrait from the age of 34?
Asaf, I just wanted to comment that I think that shadow over the eyes at 23 has been removed at 34, 11 years later. I think I've always thought that was very symbolic of that image on the left, that shadow is placed there very purposefully.
Yes, Kelly, thank you. And I assume, Kelly, what you're suggesting, something he couldn't see, he now can see quite clearly. Yes, would you agree with that?
Yes, I think there's a maturity that comes with the 34-year-old, and maybe a little more comfortable in his own skin, but visually depicting that lifting of that shadow that clouds the vision has been removed.
Yes. And before we we will actually move towards the end to the late portrait, but before we even go there, I'd like to bring this inquiry back to the context of today's workshop. The idea is that this progression from, let's say, self-ignorance in his early 20s to self-knowledge, or the ability to see himself very crisply and vividly in his mid-30s, according to this teaching, it is not something that happens to us by accident. It's not something that happens to us by mere living, by mere growing up, that in my 20s I do not know, and then the years do their job, if you see what I mean, and then in my 30s I understand. It is not automatic, it cannot be taken for granted, but is to a large extent the result of intentional effort, or if you like, cause and effect. This is what this is a very basic definition that Ouspensky offers on cause and effect. He says cause and effect means the result of your own actions, and accident means something happening to you without relation to your actions. This teaching claims that such a progression of self-knowledge cannot happen to us. It is not automatic, it is not mechanical, and it has to follow a very clear design, a very clear plan and intention, which means cause and effect. The reason has to do with the way we're structured as three-brained beings, and what education should mean. Normally, when we go to study, whether it is an organized school and college and university, or where we just study things in life, skills, gain various knowledge to be able to be useful in various areas, we are teaching, we're feeding, developing the intellectual part in us, which is the upper story. But very, very rarely do we actually educate and teach the middle part, the emotional part, which is actually the part that would be capable of achieving a progression such as we see here on Rembrandt, because there is a markedly emotional difference from here to here. Or in Gurdjieff's words, we educate nothing but our mind, he says, but the horse has no education whatever. Inner change refers only to the need of change in the horse. So we have to find how, through some kind of causes, we can affect this kind of emotional change or change in the horse. Now, I used Rembrandt's progression on the scale of a lifetime because, first of all, he portrayed it so well, so deeply, that it makes it easy, inviting to study. But we cannot practice, of course, change on this scale. It is way too long. We do not have the time in the context of a lesson to do that. And so I suggested downscaling this in the following way. I opened this task before you a week ago. I said, make an effort right now, today, this morning, this evening, whatever your time zone happens to be, that will increase your possibilities to be conscious later on in the day. Now, typically, such an effort can be either pursuing influences you know will heighten your emotional state, or avoiding influences you know will drain you. This is what we experiment with to tie this progression down to something practical and measurable. I'd like to start sharing now some of your observations, but to preserve privacy, let's end, Christian, the live stream. And once I get a signal from you, then we'll continue.
We can